So welcome to this workshop. Thank you for being here. I would like to start by recognizing that we are on the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq Nation. I am anyway. I think there's a bunch of people that are on the Willistico as well, the territory. So I'd like to take time to recognize that's important in this workshop. We're going to work together on a map that we looked at. We look at environmental justice, and I think when we talk about environmental justice, the whole question of First Nations is super important, and it's going to it's relatable to everything we're going to discuss. So that is where I want to ground us, so that we can remind ourselves that that whole question is very primordial in the work we do in environment. The way the workshop is going to work is I'm going to start by making a presentation of the tool and how we've developed it, and to afterwards look at three questions where we'll all have a chance to share our reflections, our thoughts. And when we arrive at these questions, we're also going to have Jamboards that will allow us to write down the ideas that come to mind. So there'll be two ways finally to participate. So I'm going to go right now. This is a tool that this is the work. It was really done by Saadia, who just completed our master's degree in environment on this particular subject. I want to speak about cumulative impacts. So we talk about cumulative impacts. It's really the idea that on a territory where we see several developments, several utilizations on territories done at the same time, that is done over a span of time. We have things that were done in the past, we have current projects, and we have a vision for the future. So when we're talking about cumulative impacts, we must really try to take all of that into consideration by looking what are the impacts that we've seen in the past and how it has an impact on what is being done today. There is almost 5 years when we started a network, a research network that is financed by Health Research Institutes of Canada, which is really interesting because it groups together researchers from all disciplines. We have people in health sciences and natural sciences, arts, and we also have people coming from non-academic areas, people that are with public health organizations, environmental organizations, education groups, communications groups, and all together we really saw the need to build the intersectorial capacity to be able to react to community impacts on our territory. And we've done it in communities which are rural, where there is a lot of native communities, and where that are rural. So we really based our work in British Columbia, and in particular in northern British Columbia, in Alberta, and in New Brunswick. So I'm going to speak to you about what we do in New Brunswick today. And the work that we're doing is really in partnership, tight collaboration with the New Brunswick Environmental Network, and it's together that we have developed these projects. The ECHO network is really community of learning. It's really this idea to learn together in order to be able to react, and not just react, but finish by creating actions that are going to help us better design policies that we need on our territory. So in the ECHO network, it is really a processes and tools. I'm going to present to you the work that we've done thus far around what we call the Enviro Screen, which is based on methodology that was developed in California, and which has as an objective to really to to have a relative tool for a region, which allows us to see where are the vulnerabilities, like when it comes to resource development, and in particular with with pollution. So it's a tool that collects various indicators that are going to be separated into four categories. So we have We have a pollution segment that looks at the exposures to environmental contaminants and environmental effects. And the second one, which are the population characteristics, where we look at health characteristics and socioeconomic factors. And together, when we put the two together, we end up with an indicator that combines the indicators on from the environmental data, social data, and health data. In New Brunswick, what we decided to do is we utilize health communities that the New Brunswick Health Council utilizes. And so that allowed us to have data that existed already, that was already compiled for certain regions. I present to you, and I'm aware that we're going quickly and there's a lot of details that I'm not giving you on the methodology we use. If you have any questions, we'll be able to answer them, but I especially want to get your reactions about what you're going to see as far as the results go. When we speak about the pollution, it's like when we looked at the pollutants that are atmospheric pollutants, fine particles, you know, we also looked at various contaminants in the water. We also took into consideration the predictions about where we're going when it comes to climate change, the increased precipitation, the increase in temperature, the different indicators when it comes to environmental effects, how many plants we have, do we have contaminated waterways? And when we put all that together, we obtain a card that looks like this. So these are indicators on the pollution. We can see that we really have regions that are more vulnerable, that more pollution in northern New Brunswick, and there's certain places in the south, notably St. John region. If we look at the second indicator, which is our population characteristics, we look at health issues that we know exist. We know they exist. There's a link that exists with environmental contaminants to certain illnesses that are in the air, like asthma and respiratory ailments. We also looked at indicators of cancer, cardiovascular, also their lower weight among the babies. For socioeconomic factors, really looked at as revenue, education, also the age. We look at that, we have a map that looks like this, and we see once again populations that are most vulnerable in the northern part of the province. And you'll notice that St. John, that have a lot of pollution down there, they have a population characteristic that is different. It's not perfect, but it's not as high as what we'd see elsewhere. When we take these two maps together, we obtain our combined indicator, which is called the Enviro Screen. And we have a map that looks like this. Here we really see emerge our three communities of the Bachelor as being the most vulnerable in New Brunswick. There are explanations for this. We know that we used a lot of indicators that looked at metal contaminants or contaminants that come from heavy industry. We know in that region there were several mines, a smelter, and coal-fired plants. So when we look at it, we compare to St. John, where we nonetheless have a lot of plants, and we know there's a lot of pollution here. We see a difference, and it's explained by the socioeconomic factors and health factors we looked at in those regions. So that allows us to have a first vision, if you will, of what the issues are in various parts of our province. All of these are maps, and maps that can scare people when we see regions in northern New Brunswick that are more vulnerable. We can be surprised or maybe not surprised. We're going to discuss that together. But all of that for us, I think when we talk about understanding, about developing intersectorial capacity, we cannot just simply present maps like that. We really have to have a process that accompanies these maps. That is why I took the time to explain to you how we've developed it. But where we want to go with this. We in our pilot version, but we'd like to be able to adapt it to be able to better reflect the realities of our province. Eventually, maybe have a map that shows us basically the viability, look at the positive things in the province, but all of that has to be developed together. So we're uh, so, so we're asking for your help finally to develop the processes that are going to accompany this type of tool. So maybe I'll take a little break here to ask if there are any questions. Maybe you need more details before we get into discussions. I have a question. I'm not sure it's time to ask them. I saw that the areas like Tracadie and a little lower on the southeast side were between 25 and the Shediac zone. And I was questioning, is there a reason behind that? Do we have four zones that are white?
Il n'y a pas de vulnérabilité là.
There's no vulnerabilities there. First of all, I would just like to say it's a relative tool. You know, we're either all vulnerable or no vulnerabilities, or somewhere in the middle. But yeah, there's some regions that are seem to be less vulnerable in comparison to others. These are regions that have less heavy industry. I think that's one of the explanations. But I think maybe there's things lacking in the tool where we don't have any indicators to look at agriculture, for example. Very little forestry about as well. So I think that will have a role to play in how we see the vulnerabilities emerge in on our maps. I think what we see is really, and when it comes to heavy industry, it's true that for certain regions, like for certain of these regions, but we know, for example, that Dieppe and Quispam-Cis are two regions where the socioeconomic status is higher in the province. So there's also issues that are quite interesting to explore there when it comes to environmental justice and also on how the population is being displaced. I think there's a lot of things that we can explore on that particular difference that we see. There's a part that is explained by the fact that we don't have all of the indicators in all our communities. Thank you, Céline. Anyways, the Tracadie Niguac zone, we know it very well. There's a lot of agriculture in that area. So when it comes to water quality, if ever I can be of help, I don't know if the work is finished, but if I can help, I propose to give you a hand, and we will. That is noted, and we're not going to forget it either. So we're going to be in contact with you. Thank you very much, Marion. I have Amélie. That's a question. Thank you. In fact, I have two, if you'll allow me. The first is where did you take your the character population characteristics? Where did you get your data? Was that with StatsCan? I'd be curious to know where you went to get your data, because we know that when we go get data, it's not maybe it's not always the reality of things, but I just be curious about that. For the socioeconomic data, that's data comes from Statistics Canada. Uh, for the health data, we took the data that was collected by the New Brunswick Health Council for their community profiles. We chose to do this because the data was already uh, corrected, but at the start, we'd have to find them ourselves. But this is data that really represents the averages in the regions. It's not perfect either but it regroups everything. Thank you for that. And my second question, in fact, is where do you see or how can you use that map? Because I find the idea is super interesting, but what is the objective of this at the end of the day? Is it to try to go see every region and say, what does it look like, basically? It's going to be part of the exercise we're going to do together. But I think that that type of tool, certainly there's a lot of interest on the government side because it helps them to see what type of policies they need. But I think because there's a very large potential with the communities to be able to seize the nuances, what the context must add to that. So it's really is a tool to bring us elsewhere. But the idea is really an awareness tool, so that together we can stop and look at the data uh, apart, but all look at it together. So really say, oh, look, when we look at this like socioeconomic data, here's the picture we see. Thank you. I think I have René Turcotte. I lowered my hand because it's pretty much the same question as Anali. Where did you get your data on health? Because I was surprised to see that in the St. John region, it was less. I think it was the first map, the blue map, because there's no because of the pollution due to the heavy industry there. So I'm sure you weren't just looking at asthma, but there's we know that in the north there's a lot of radon, more radon in the north and south that could have an effect on cancer rates too, and other pollution. Pollution. But you base yourselves on the New Brunswick Health Council for your information about the population's health, right? Yes, that's it. Ideally, we would like to push that a little further. It is, but it's a starting point. In fact, what we did was really tried to stay as close as possible to the Enviro Screen information. It's not always the same indicators because there were some we didn't have or that weren't pertinent. So we added climate data that wasn't involved in the first one. We really wanted to stay as close to the methodology as possible, and yes, we know there's a correlation exists between various types of indicators, but now we really want to take that and go further in order to have something that is more contextualized to our region. Thank you. I also know that we have a comment. The- It's not just the accumulation of health indicators, the whole socioeconomic aspects that are added to that. So it's kind of like a combination. We know that by the way methodology works, it's not just even if sometimes we have more cases of asthma in St. John, but if the indicators are uh, less high, for example, for asthma, it's not as if we just, it, it's like, I would say, it allows us to really see how things work, but also St. John, we've had discussions with our partners also in St. John, it's possible that everything socioeconomic is more favorable than other regions. So that could affect certain indicators. However, for we cannot forget that these are regions that are larger than just the city of St. John. There are other sectors that are less impoverished. I'll take your question, Marion, and after that, we will look at the questions that we had for you.
C'est pour faire du pause sur ce que Saadia a dit.
To add to what Saadia said, I was wondering if there was an interest in, in looking at certain factors. We see there's an inequality there. Did you think about that to weigh one factor against another? These are things that we've done, and certainly things that were done in the development of the methodology of the Enviro Screen. And in this case, we're looking at things equal to everything. We, of course, a lot of hypotheses that at the basis of this, but we could certainly discuss this further, Mary, because I really would like to get your input when it comes to the northern part of the province. What I'm going to do is I'll give you the questions right now that we had, the questions we had formulated for you. Is going to maintain the discussion. So the first question that I have And it already started being come out in the questions that were asked. But how do you react to the map? How do you react to the map presented? What surprises you? And Saadia, I think you're going to put a link for the Jamboard, or let me just stop sharing my screen so you can share yours. Yes.
Juste unmuter. OK. Donc, on a comme un Jamboard, puis...
So we have a Jamboard here. I would say, think about the question for about 2 minutes, and then after that, give your opinion. In the Jamboard, you can insert little squares, little boxes of text. So I put the link in the chat box to get the link for the Jamboard. So the first question is, how do you react to the maps presented, and what surprises you? It'd be interesting to get your opinions on that. And if there are people that want to speak, go ahead. We could do both at the same time. The question: this map, is that on the pollutions or the population characteristics, or both together? They're both together. Thank you. So all you have to do is look at one of the. I never worked with a Jamboard. I worked with something similar with the city of Moncton, but it was quite frustrating. I'm not sure if you see my screen.
Oui. Donc, tu peux cliquer sur le text box.
You click on the text box, and then you click on the Jamboard. It gives you a little square where you can insert text in there. Thank you. I see comments in the chat box. And I'm wondering if people want to maybe up the comments, but I see, for example, I'm surprised that the St. John area is not as dark blue as what we'd see in the northern New Brunswick areas. Gordon stated that. Gordon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Des gens qui sont surpris de voir comment la baie des Chaleurs.
So maybe some people are surprised how the Bay of Chaleur is shown in this map. I'm not able to get my square, so able to add text. So I'm going to go in the chat box. I'll put my question there. Yeah, put it in the chat box. You can even say it orally as well, Renee, if you want. I wanted to say that I wasn't surprised to see in the north is like that because I was surprised to see Moncton was affected like that. I don't see them. Maybe you can make the map a little bit bigger to see how the Moncton region is affected. Moncton area, in fact, is in the second from 25 to 50% range.
La région de Miramichi aussi.
The Miramichi region as well. It surprises me that there's it's not more severe than that. Anybody else that was surprised by Miramichi? It's a big territory as well. The way it's divided, essentially. Yes. So there's just Miramichi. I have the impression that that the results would be different if it was just Miramichi itself. One of the surprises for us was to not see Edmonton come out more than that. Well, like you said, it wasn't just health because of pollution. There's There's all kinds of socioeconomic factors that were taken into consideration. And Edmonton region is not necessarily a poor region. People have a lot of resources there.
Oui.
Yes.
Mais même par rapport à
But
la
even when it comes to
pollution,
the
c'était
pollution indicator, it did not come out as much.
Ça se peut-tu aussi que
Is it
la,
possible that the northern region with fisheries and all that could play a larger role when it comes to health, while the other regions, seeing as for example, Miramichi, there's less plants right now. I forget the name of the plant that is there right now, but other than that one, it would be less affected. While in the Bay of Chaleur, we have NV Power and the smelter and the fisheries and all that that is being done in that region. Is that why it's more affected because of that? I think it is one of the explanations. And I think at the start we were talking about cumulative impacts, that it's important to know what happened in those areas in the past. So we know that it's a region that has a long history of
avec les mines.
development with the mines and with the smelter and pulp and paper mills. Pulp and paper mills have closed since the start of the millennium, but there remains that it was quite massive in its time. We'd see a lot of such plants in a short distance, which is not necessarily the case in other areas other than St. John. But nonetheless there's Beldoun with its coal-fired plant. Why did all the northwestern region and the middle, Florence and Aquic and all that, why is that darker? It's nonetheless an agricultural zone, a lot of mountains. There's not a whole lot of industry there. Well, there's a lot of other processing plants like the sawmills that could play a role in the games we have. There's pulp and paper mills in that region as well. And also the communities that are represented there, the Dalhousie or Bathurst, it's not just that Dalhousie the town. There's small communities that includes like Dalhousie, there's Beldoun, there's Petit Rocher, St. John. There's also other communities around St. John that are taken into consideration. And there's some communities that are rich in forestry, all sawmills and all agricultural operations, and it goes way back. It allows us to see, nonetheless, what the cumulative effects are. We have to look at it's not just right now these impacts are occurring. Impacts occurred in the past and they remain. Their effects remain. So did you look at the pesticide spread of pesticides and glyphosate in the forest? Is that taken into consideration in your study? No, sadly, there was no data. There's not enough. The data were not easily accessible. We couldn't get them throughout the province. So that is something certainly that we would like to look at. Same thing for other pesticides and herbicides, right? I have two hands up. I see Tim first and then Anneli. I was wondering, when it comes to the headquarters, heavy industries present in different regions. We know that in St. John, yes, there's heavy industry, but and Irving is there. But I'm not sure it's a question, but do we know if the headquarters of those industries are present in those same communities or where they're exploiting the resource, or are they located in Moncton, Fredericton, St. John, in other centers? I don't think that is incorporated in your card, but it's just a question I'm asking myself. I like the Gordon's comment about one neighborhood, one postal code that could hide the fact a bit where rich areas and nonetheless have some forms of poverty. Yes, absolutely. I think that Tim, the question is it's I don't think we have a concrete answer just to simply say that yes, in northern part of the province, there's a lot of these mills are closing.
un
So
départ.
we have a certain departure of workforce that was well paid. There's all kinds of issues going on in the province that placing are taken into consideration. So we're using data that
Sur la fonderie,
happened in 2016 before the smelter
sur
wasn't closed at that point, but there was a lot of closures in the region. The headquarters were no longer in that region.
Je vais prendre.
I am going to.
Je prononce ton nom de 45
Anali,
000 façons. Là, ça...
I'm pronouncing your name 45,000 different ways. They're like, Anali? Yes. Me, it's
Je me pose toujours la question à
I
comment
was asking myself the question, how is this map going to be utilized? And have a good understanding where the data comes from as well. But I would like to know a little bit more, if it's possible, a little bit more data on the pollution, if there's a direct link. I think it was in the first slide that you showed us to start. It comes up, everything we found in the operations. You know, we're talking about heavy industry, but to make the direct connection that when we see this in the air, this is caused by X. Is it a paper mill that caused that? You know, does it make sense what I'm saying? Do you understand what I'm saying? A bit more that link, I think, would be interesting. I think this tool could be useful, but if we find this,
l'exposition,
let's
la
say
chose-
if we find that the exposure X in a certain region, we show this is caused by, you know, and in fact, there are links. We could discuss this if you want to. We could discuss it outside this workshop, but the tool has been conceived to show us links between the contaminants, the exposure, and the various actors in the community. And your question, I know there are other questions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring us to the second question we have because time is running out.
Saadia, peux-tu changer le Jamboard? Okay.
You-
Donc,
So the second question that we had for you,
nous
and it goes in the direction that you want to bring us to, Amélie, is to seeing as that we see a disparity between regions, what actions can we put into place? Since we see disparities between regions, what actions can we put in place to enhance our communities, reduce social, environmental, and health inequities? How can we utilize this tool to improve the wellness of our population and our ecosystems?
C'est possible de partager le lien dans le chat pour qu'on puisse l'ouvrir de notre côté. On le voit
Oui,
Can
bien.
oui,
you put the link in the
Merci.
chat box, please? Yes, thank you.
OK.
Puis peut-être, vu que je vois qu'il reste 5 minutes.
Maybe seeing that we only have 5 minutes and the third question is, it looks at climate change. I'll give you the third question as well. So
On voulait aussi
we also
vous demander comment
I want to ask
ça
how-
joue dans tout ça. Comment le
how climate changes amplify impacts of natural resource development and vice versa.
climatique? Est-ce que
And how does this map help you think about climate changes? Did you have any ideas?
tout ça ensemble, là, puis vous pouvez-
So all of that together, the questions 2 and 3.
Si je pourrais mentionner quelque chose.
Maybe if I can mention something. Right now, there's a new project called Healthy Coastlines, and their goal essentially is to create a conservation plan. And it struck me because you're finishing up these tools here to help communities in their various plans that are being developed. And I feel as if the conservation plan could utilize this data as well in the advancement of their plan, and also share it with their community as well. It's to see how we as the citizens in the Bay Chaleur community, for example, how like you said, it's to put all the different things together to have a better idea of what we have to play with and the efforts that we need to put into place. That's it. I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
D'autres commentaires, des
Any
idées?
other comments, questions, ideas on how to utilize this tool, how it helps us think about climate change a little more? I have an idea, but listen, it's possible that's a bit crazy in the sense that when we're talking about climate change, it's going to have a different effect on each region, in the sense that along the coastlines, there's erosion, there's going to have flooding in certain places compared to other areas where we're not going to see that. Each region will be affected differently by climate change on the regional level and from one region to another. So it'd be interesting. And I know there's a lot of work to do such a map, but a similar map maybe of what the climate change is going to look at like for each region, because we're talking about climate change, we're talking about it in a global sense, this can happen, but how is it going to affect each region as such? I think that with what you have there, it would be easy to see it here. This is one population more vulnerable. Here's what's going to happen if nothing's being done. It might be just an element that is lacking somewhere. I don't want to give you any more, put any more work on your plate that you already have. It's huge what you've done, to go get all that information to have it all in one, test all in one place. But that's an element I think that may be lacking. Might be interested in exploring as well. If I can add to what Amélie said, there's at-risk maps. Peninsula, we did it for those at risk of flooding and erosion. I know there are other risk factors taken into account. Maybe if you can receive those the risk card and superimpose this one, I think it might show us a little bit more about climate change. Because when I look, we had the impression that the shipping and Lamac and we really have a lot of very high risk zones when it comes to infrastructure, roads, heritage, and we have different strategies, but there are some people that are worried to lose their homes. They have their homes next to a cliff. When we look at these maps, we can feel that stress. And I forget which terms you employed, but that whole stress about losing your home and things like that. What am I leaving to the next generation? There's an exodus in the region that are being done. There are people native from here that they will not be coming back because they know that look, it's not much use. They prefer living and remaining in zones like the larger towns.
Donc, je vois que j'ai trop parlé encore une
So I
fois.
see I spoke too much again, but maybe Saadia, on the Canadian Peninsula, we have this type of information, but for the others, maybe through the Regional Service Commission, we can get more, but it affects the coastal region for sure. But I'm sure there's others like when it comes to frost, temperature, insects, and there's other kind of cards, at-risk cards that we can.
Je vous remercie.
Well, I want to thank you. I see that there's people from other groups that are joining us. Thank you very much for your great participation. Thank you to you. Thank you. Thank you, Céline.
Bienvenue, re-bienvenue tout le monde. Je m'excuse, je sais qu'on n'a jamais
I
assez de temps.
apologize. I know we never have enough time for these types of conversations.
Fast, but I hope your discussions in the other groups were fruitful. And as a reminder, all the workshops were recorded, and we'll be sending them out to everyone who registered and probably to all the NBEN member groups as well. So if you're a workshop presenter and there's any supplementary information that you would like to share, please make sure we have it, and we'll include that in the emails. So that brings us to the end of the Eco-Confluence portion of the day. Hopefully next year we can do it in person. Thanks again to the sponsors that are helping with our 30th anniversary campaign. Our two anchor sponsors, or two main sponsors up there on the screen. I invite everyone to stick around, especially member groups and associates, but especially member groups, to help us ensure quorum for the AGA that will take place right after the break. We have it, I think. I did a little count, but we need everyone just to make sure we don't lose it. So please stick around, and we'll be back at in about 8 minutes, I guess, at 3 p.m. If you stick around too, if you want to ask questions in the chat to some of the workshop presenters or speakers, I think they're still around, so that can be done. And at 3, we'll get going with the AGA. And if you need to leave, well, thank you so much. Merci beaucoup.